The royal family was to become a weapon of mass destruction in Britain's media war. The king vowed that as long as the war lasted, he would appear in uniform. The king and queen tirelessly visited the armed forces, bombed civilians, and war factories. To those with shattered homes and bodies, a royal visit was a symbol that the whole British nation knew and cared. The Queen's talent for communication and empathy had strengthened a nervous and anxious king performing his royal duties. In the same way, she strengthened the British people during the war. After the Queen's visits to factories, production figures always improved. Not everyone loved Elizabeth. French Prime Minister Édouard Daladier remarked Elizabeth was an excessively ambitious young woman who would be ready to sacrifice every other country in the world so that she may remain queen. On Christmas Day, 1939, George delivered the most memorable broadcast of his reign. He borrowed the words from an obscure poem, standing for what George and Elizabeth meant to the British fighting for their way of life.
I said to the man who stood at the gate of the year, give me a light that I may tread safely into the unknown. And he replied, go out into the darkness and put your hand into the hand of God.
The royal family lived on the same restricted rations as everyone else. Bathtubs were marked with depth lines to limit water use. Palaces were stripped of their grand finery. They became dark and icy. Heating and lighting was limited. Royal parklands were ploughed as the king played his part digging for victory as Britain tried to feed itself. The king and queen's little family was projected as what was good about Britain. The king and his daughters counterpoint to the strutting dictatorships of Italy and Germany and the tyranny of Soviet Bolshevism. Many British children were evacuated to safety away from air attack. There was talk of sending Elizabeth and Margaret to Canada. But the Queen publicly demonstrated the love and dedication of the king for his people by stating, "The children will not go without me. I will not leave without the king. The king will stay, come what may." When visiting a bomb site, someone called out above the crowd, "Thank God for a good king," to which he replied, "Thank God for a good people." There were deliberate attempts by German forces to assassinate the king. The king was of the opinion that the bombing of Buckingham Palace was the work of a German relative in the Nazi Air Force. The Queen looked at the event differently, producing what today would be called a soundbite. "At least I can now look the East End in the face." The king and queen also feared a kidnapping attempt by Nazi special forces. Elizabeth is not all soft sympathy. An army deserter broke into Buckingham Palace hoping to win the Queen's sympathy, but she was tough on the man, telling him to take your punishment like a man and serve your country like one. Britain's Prime Minister meets the sovereign every week. Churchill knew terrible truths about the war, knowledge he could share with no one except the king. One of George VI's greatest wartime services was to be Churchill's confessor, sharing the burden of terrible, fearsome secrets. The king knew when Nazi U-boats were starving Britain to the edge of submission. He knew that Allied lives were being sacrificed to hide the breaking of secret German codes, how many RAF planes were really shot down during the Battle of Britain, about the Holocaust, and the king knew about the atomic bomb. George VI had the courage to know and hide the truth, when all around were cheerful and optimistic. The king was idolized by his daughter Elizabeth, who saw in him a true war hero, sacrificing everything for his country. To understand the relationship between George and his eldest daughter is to understand how the princess would in time do her own duty and judge her own children. The royal family shared in personal tragedy, losing the king's youngest brother George, the Duke of Kent, killed in an air crash whilst serving with the RAF. At the end of the war, George and Elizabeth could rightly share in the victory celebrations. On VE Day, the royal couple stood upon the balcony of Buckingham Palace. Their daughters joined them before secretly wandering the streets and shouting with the crowd for the king to come forth.
This is Movie Time.